Okay, on to quiz two, I think. Yeah. So, what's the key point about the Comanche Empire? That the Comanches created an empire within North America that was stronger than the Spanish presence, and that the Comanches stopped the Spanish from moving further north and west in Texas in the 1750s when they wiped out the San Saba mission slash Presidio in the 1750s. Um, they dominated. They had so little respect for the Spanish that they really didn't even bother to kill most of the Spanish. They could have killed many more, but they didn't think the Spanish were worthy of warrior deaths. So one of the big points I'm trying to get across in this class is the usual story that we have is how Europeans dominate native groups. Well, this is not true in Spanish Texas. The Comanches really dominated the Spaniards, and the Comanche would control the area west and north of San Antonio in eastern New Mexico, all the way until the 1870s, which is my grandmother's grandmother's time. My grandmother's grandmother remembers Comanche, and one of her relatives was actually scalped by a Comanche warrior, but he survived. Let's see. Aguayo is the Spanish official who came up into Texas after the so-called Chicken War, and he's the one that says, "Okay, screw it, we're going to make this happen." And he comes up, major expedition. The Spanish get serious about settling Texas. He comes up, he founds La Bahia and Goliad. He reinforces the missions in East Texas. He reinforces the missions in San Antonio. One of the missions is named after Aguayo. And after Aguayo goes back into Mexico, across the Rio Grande, of course, Texas is Spanish, and it's all Spanish territory at this time. He never comes back north of the Rio Grande. He comes up, does the job, goes back home, which I think is pretty awesome. But he's really the European father of Texas, because after him, the Spanish are here to stay. Among the indigenous, what's the following is true. What you have in terms of native power structures. The Comanche come into Spanish Texas in the 1720s. They dominate the Lipan Apache. They push the Lipan Apache south. And the Lipan Apache, in turn, moved into the kind of the San Antonio mission area, which has 5 missions by the 1730s. They hassle San Antonio, they steal horses. And the Lipan Apache dominate the small Indian groups that we call under the umbrella name Colatecan, although the Colatecan were made up of a number of smaller indigenous groups that spoke different languages, had different rites and rituals. So just remember Colatecan is an umbrella term. So Comanche strongest, Lipan Apache second strongest, much weaker than the Comanches, and then the small groups who are the Colatecan people. And the Colatecan peoples, I should say, they come into the San Antonio missions because they're looking for some help against the Lipan Apache. They see the Spanish as allies that can help them against the Lipan Apache. So that's kind of the setup of how it worked in the native world in Spanish Texas. Let's see. So the Colatecan and Lipan Apaches both sought protection. Uh, Oh no, that's a question. That's not a, or that's a possible answer. In my podcast, I said the missions were important to me because I had a picture of my mom and dad at the missions in 1944. My dad trained in West Texas. He's from Staten Island, New York. Met my mom out there in Wink and got married. Anyway, I have this cool picture of them by I think at Concepcion. So let's see. And why did I ask that question? Just to see if you're listening to the podcast. Maybe it's kind of a jerk thing for me to do, but I don't think so. Uh, why did the Spanish create a mission Presidio in what's now San Antonio? Because it was halfway between San Juan Bautista, which was created in 1700s, kind of an Spanish infrastructure in their north, and the missions of East Texas. Why are the missions in East Texas? To keep an eye on Louisiana. Don't forget about that power relationship. The Spanish are very wary of the French in Louisiana, and they want to keep an eye on them. So San Antonio it's part of that infrastructure that the Spanish are creating in their territory in Texas. And also, there's a lot of water here, and I talked about that because of the Edwards Aquifer, just tons of springs, tons of game, fishing. And native groups had been coming to this area for, we think, maybe even thousands of years. It was a shared area, shared encampment. It's kind of cool to think about it. It adds kind of our depth of our understanding. Now, I'm not talking about the UTSA area of the main campus. I'm talking about downtown, which is 25 miles from the main campus. So for a bunch of reasons, the Spanish created missions in Avila in 1718 in what's now San Antonio. Probably the most successful Mission Presidio complex that the Spanish created. Santa Fe was also successful, but San Antonio is far larger than Santa Fe. Let's see. Oh, how did they miscommunicate? Remember, in the 1690s, after La Salle washes the shore, the Spanish freak out. They hunt down La Salle, but he's already been murdered by his own men. They find out that the fort that he created, or the settlement fort at San Luis, has been destroyed by native groups. People have been killed or taken captive. So what the Spanish decided to do under Father Hidalgo's urging, they march into an expedition into East Texas, and they begin their first attempt to settle among the Caddoan, because again, the Caddoan, two things. The Caddoan are right next door to the French, number one, and the Caddoan just coincidentally happen to be good candidates for Christianization because they're an agricultural people. They're not nomadic. And so, but of course, this initial attempt by the Spanish is a failure. But to answer the question, as the Spanish move up into Caddoan territory, they're carrying an image of the Virgin Mary because they're quite religious. And the Caddoan think that this is a sign of peace, because whenever they encountered strangers, they would send out their women as a sign of peace. So there was a miscommunication that worked in the Spaniards' favor, although they blow it, as I talked about in my podcast, because they become quite aggressive and hostile, especially towards Caddoan women. They start trying to force Catholicism down the throat of the Caddoans. And ultimately, within just a couple of years, the Spanish are forced out of East Texas. They will come back, though. 1718. That's the year San Antonio was found, the same year as New Orleans, although New Orleans was much more successful in terms of population than San Antonio. But San Antonio is still here. The greatest failure of the Spanish government, the failure to populate Spanish Texas to any great degree. There were Spaniards here, but as late as 1820, right at that point where Spanish Texas becomes Mexican Texas, there were probably less than 3,000 people of European descent in Texas. Kind of incredible to think about. The Spaniards had controlled this territory since 1492. But again, it's too far from Mexico City. You wouldn't really want to come to Spanish Texas unless you had to. There's no mineral wealth up here. The native groups are too tough. So it's a paradox. Two things are happening. The Spanish leave a permanent imprint on Texas, rivers, Spanish language, Roman Catholic Church, ranching. So the Spanish legacy is permanent, and interestingly, it's stronger than the Comanche legacy. Even though the Comanche dominated Spanish Texas, they've left almost no legacy in Texas today, whereas the Spanish, who were weaker, have left a profound legacy on Texas. And that's because the Spanish had a set of written rules. They had records. They had archives. Just the kind of thing that creates a kind of a permanent presence. So what's the biggest failure? That the Spanish don't create a huge population up here like they do in Mexico and in Peru. Let's see, the map of in Spanish Texas. What did I put here? That where the Spanish Empire and the Comanche Empire met was just north of and west of of San Antonio, right about really where 1604 is, where the mall is. What's that mall? La Cantera. That's the southern edge of the Comanche Rio. And the Comanches didn't have written maps, but they knew what their territory was. And when the Spanish moved into the Comanche Rio or tried anyway, like at San Saba, the Comanche just wiped them out. So again, this idea there's two empires in North America. Now we're understanding that the Comanches actually had an empire, a very powerful empire in North America. Let's see. The mother mission is San Juan Bautista, built in 1700s at the insistence of Father Hidalgo. And again, think of it as infrastructure as the Spanish are trying to create more of a presence in what's now Spanish Texas. So that's the gateway mission. It's in Mexico today, but it was the traditional way that the Spaniards would come up into Spanish Texas. And it's in the Eagle Pass area. The Pueblo Revolt affected Texas history because what happened is when the Pueblos kicked out the Spanish for about 20 years, horses suddenly became under the control of the native groups in the Santa Fe area. So because of that, groups such as the Comanche and the Wapan Apache gain access to the horse. And think of the horse as a technology. Again, it allows these native groups to hunt. It allows them to go to war. It gives them mobility. Think of it as a technology. So that's how the Santa Fe Revolt in 1680 affected Texas, because especially the Comanche, who were not much to write home about before the Santa Fe Revolt, once they get a hold of the horse, they just go nuts and they become the dominant group in what's now the American Southwest. Okay, let's see. Well, I've talked about same thing, mobility. Once the Comanche gain access to the horse, they get tremendous, and they turn out to be just brilliant at raising horses, riding horses. They're stealing horses. It's all about the horse with the Comanche. They're some of the great equestrian warriors in really all of human history. Let's see, again, mobility, I make a big deal out of that. And the last one is, it's the answer. What was the game plan of the Spanish? It was the Mission Presidio system, where the Spanish government was very much involved in this. There's no church-state separation. What you would have, as you had in San Antonio, you would have missions created to Christianize the native groups. And then to protect the missions, you would have presidios created nearby. Same thing happened in La Bahia, which is now Goliad. And actually, there's a remnant of the Presidio in Goliad. There's no remnant of the San Antonio Presidio, although, of course, the missions are still around. They're quite beautiful. And you can have extra credit if you go to them, but I'll talk about that more later. So that's the Spanish game plan. It actually didn't work in most places, but it really worked in San Antonio in a big way. San Antonio is the 8th largest city in the country now. It worked in Goliad in a smaller sense. It worked in Santa Fe. It worked in Tucson. It worked in Santa Barbara. But San Antonio is one of the most successful examples of the Mission Presidio doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing, and creating a population center in this very remote area of Spanish North America.